There is a moment when anger feels like power. Your heart begins to race, your thoughts become sharper, your body prepares for battle, and suddenly you feel certain that you must respond. You must explain yourself. You must defend yourself. You must make them regret what they did. But what if that feeling of power is actually the moment you are losing control? What if the person who provoked you has already taken something from you before you ever say a word? They have taken control of your attention, your emotions, your judgment, and possibly your entire day. The Stoics understood something most people learn far too late. When someone can control your emotional reaction, they can control you without ever touching you. Anger promises strength. One insult can change your mood. One disrespectful message can ruin your morning. One person ignoring you can occupy your thoughts for hours. One betrayal can make you say things you later wish you could take back. And the tragedy is that the person who caused the anger may have already moved on while you are still fighting the battle inside your own head. This is why the Stoic does not treat anger as something harmless. Anger is not simply an emotion that appears and disappears. When you surrender yourself to it, anger can become a commander. It begins telling you what to say, what to do, whom to attack, whom to blame, and what decisions to make. And when anger becomes the commander, reason becomes the prisoner. Think about how often anger has made people destroy things they spent years building. A relationship can survive disagreement, but one sentence spoken in rage can create a wound that remains for years. A career can be damaged by one impulsive reaction. A friendship can disappear because someone refused to control their temper. A person can spend years trying to build a reputation for wisdom and maturity, only to destroy it in a few seconds because they allowed anger to speak for them. The Stoics were not teaching people to become emotionless. They were teaching something much harder. They were teaching people to become masters of their emotions instead of servants to them. There is a profound difference between feeling anger and obeying anger. You may feel the heat rising inside you. You may feel insulted. You may feel betrayed. You may even believe that the other person deserves a response. But between the feeling and the action there is a space. And inside that space is your freedom. That space is where strength lives. A weak mind reacts immediately because it believes every emotion deserves immediate action. A disciplined mind can experience the same emotion and still choose what happens next. That is the difference between impulse and self-command. Imagine someone insults you publicly. Your first instinct may be to strike back. Your mind immediately begins creating arguments. You remember everything that person has ever done wrong. You start preparing the perfect response. You imagine how embarrassed they will feel when you expose them. For a moment, it feels satisfying. You believe you are taking your power back. But look deeper. Who is actually controlling whom? The other person made one statement, and now you have spent the next hour thinking about them. They have entered your mind without permission. They have taken your peace without asking. They have changed your mood while perhaps continuing with their own day without another thought about you. This is the hidden cost of anger. You think you are punishing them, but you are often punishing yourself. You lose your peace first. You lose your clarity first. You lose your ability to think strategically first. And sometimes you lose your dignity before the other person loses anything at all. This is why reacting immediately is so dangerous. Reaction gives the moment control over your future. When you are angry, your mind becomes extremely focused on the present emotion. You want relief now. You want justice now. You want recognition now. You want the other person to understand what they did now. But life is not judged by what feels satisfying in the next 10 seconds. Life is shaped by the consequences of the decisions you make after those 10 seconds have passed. The Stoic asks a different question, not, how can I make them feel what I feel, but, what response will allow me to remain in command of myself? That question changes everything. Because the goal is not to defeat every person who provokes you. The goal is to become a person who cannot easily be provoked. There is a strange kind of power in becoming difficult to disturb. When people discover that they can insult you without controlling your behavior, they lose one of their greatest weapons. When they realize that criticism does not immediately pull you into an argument, they have less influence over you. When they discover that disrespect does not automatically turn you into an angry person, they begin to understand that your emotions belong to you. This does not mean becoming passive. Stoicism is not weakness disguised as peace. It does not mean allowing people to mistreat you. It does not mean accepting injustice without action. It means refusing to surrender your judgment while dealing with the problem. There is a difference between controlled firmness and uncontrolled anger. A calm person can establish a boundary. A calm person can walk away. A calm person can say no. A calm person can end a relationship. A calm person can report wrongdoing. A calm person can defend themselves. The difference is that they do not need rage to do it. Anger often makes people believe that intensity equals strength. It doesn't. A person can shout and still be weak. A person can threaten and still be afraid. A person can insult everyone in the room and still be completely controlled by their insecurity. Real strength is quieter. Real strength is being able to look directly at something that provokes you and say, "You do not get to decide what I become." That is self-command. And self-command is one of the deepest principles of Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly returned to the importance of governing the mind. He understood that external events could disturb the body, the circumstances, the reputation, and the plans of a person. But the individual still had responsibility for the judgments they formed about those events. Someone can insult you, but they cannot force you to become insulting. Someone can betray you, but they cannot force you to become bitter. Someone can disrespect you, but they cannot force you to abandon your character. Someone can behave unfairly, but they cannot force you to surrender your reason. That final decision remains yours. And this is where anger begins to lose its power. You cannot always control what people do. You cannot control whether someone lies about you. You cannot control whether someone appreciates you. You cannot control whether someone keeps their promises. You cannot control whether someone misunderstands your intentions. You cannot control whether another person behaves with integrity, but you can control what you do with what happens. This distinction is simple, but living by it can transform your life. Most people spend enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to control things that were never theirs to control. They want other people to apologize. They want other people to understand. They want other people to change. They want other people to admit they were wrong. They want the past to become different. And when reality refuses to obey them, anger appears. But anger cannot negotiate with reality. It cannot reverse yesterday. It cannot force someone to love you. It cannot make an insult disappear. It cannot make a betrayal never happen. It cannot guarantee that the world will be fair. Anger only adds another problem to the original problem. You were already hurt, and now you are consumed. You were already disappointed, and now you are exhausted. You were already disrespected, and now you are giving the person even more control over your mind. This is why the Stoic approach begins with acceptance, not because acceptance means approval, but because you cannot intelligently respond to reality until you stop arguing with the fact that reality has already happened. Something happened. It happened. Now what? That question is far more powerful than asking why it happened 100 times. Why did they do this? Why did they treat me this way? Why didn't they appreciate me? Why did they betray me? Why wasn't life fair? These questions can keep you trapped. The Stoic asks, what can I do now? What is still within my control? What kind of person do I want to be in response? Those questions return your power to you. Anger wants you to look outward. Strength begins by looking inward. This is why one of the most important disciplines you can develop is learning to notice anger before it becomes action. Do not wait until you are already shouting. Do not wait until the message has already been sent. Do not wait until the relationship has already been damaged. Learn to recognize the first signs, the tightening in your chest, the change in your breathing, the urge to prove yourself, the sudden need to respond immediately, the desire to make someone suffer because they made you suffer. That is the moment when you need to become especially careful, because anger does not usually ask you to make a wise decision. It asks you to make an immediate decision, and those are not the same thing. The angry mind says, answer now. Wisdom says, think first. The angry mind says, make them regret it. Wisdom says, protect your character. The angry mind says, you cannot let them disrespect you. Wisdom says, you do not need to destroy yourself proving that you deserve respect. The angry mind wants victory over another person. The Stoic wants victory over himself. That is a much greater victory. Because imagine reaching the point where someone can insult you and you remain composed. Someone can criticize you and you examine whether there is truth in it, instead of immediately becoming defensive. Someone can provoke you, and you choose whether their behavior deserves your attention. Someone can walk away from you, and you do not chase them in desperation. Someone can misunderstand you, and you do not spend the entire night trying to control their opinion. That is freedom. Not freedom from difficult people. Freedom from being controlled by difficult people. And once you understand that distinction, anger begins to look very different. You begin to see that every reaction has a price. Sometimes the price is your peace. Sometimes it is your reputation. Sometimes it is your relationship. Sometimes it is your opportunity. Sometimes it is your self-respect. And sometimes the greatest price is becoming the very kind of person you once promised yourself you would never become. That is the danger of uncontrolled anger. It does not merely affect the moment. It can slowly reshape your character. If you repeatedly respond to disrespect with aggression, aggression becomes easier. If you repeatedly respond to criticism with defensiveness, defensiveness becomes your identity. If you repeatedly allow anger to make your decisions, eventually you stop recognizing the difference between what you genuinely believe and what your anger wants you to believe. The Stoic path is different. You do not have to eliminate every emotion. You have to stop handing every emotion the steering wheel. Your anger can be present without being in charge. Your disappointment can be present without controlling your behavior. Your pain can be present without turning you cruel. Your fear can be present without deciding your future. Your emotions are information, but they are not always instructions. That distinction can save you from years of unnecessary suffering. Because there will always be people who test your patience. There will always be people who misunderstand you. There will always be moments when life feels unfair. There will always be someone who says something you do not like. The question is not whether you will encounter these things. You will. The question is whether every difficult person you meet will be allowed to determine the person you become. The answer has to be no. Your peace cannot depend on everyone behaving properly. Your strength cannot depend on everyone respecting you. Your confidence cannot depend on everyone approving of you. And your emotional stability cannot depend on the world becoming convenient. You need something deeper. You need an internal standard that says, whatever happens outside me, I will decide what happens within me. That is where the Stoic becomes difficult to defeat. Not because life stops hurting, not because betrayal disappears, not because criticism stops, not because anger never comes, but because the person becomes stronger than the impulse to react. And once you can control that impulse, you begin to discover something even more powerful. The person who controls your anger controls the direction of your life. The next time someone provokes you, remember that the first battle is not with them. It is with the part of yourself that wants to surrender your peace just to prove a point. That is the battle that matters, and winning it may change far more than the argument ever could. The battle becomes even deeper when you realize that anger is often connected to the story you tell yourself about what happened. The event itself may be small, but the meaning you attach to it can make it enormous. Someone does not reply to your message, and your mind says they are disrespecting you. Someone gives you criticism, and your mind says they are trying to humiliate you. Someone succeeds where you failed, and your mind says they are proving that you are not good enough. The event happens once, but your mind can replay it hundreds of times. This is where anger gains fuel. The Stoics understood that our judgments about events can become more painful than the events themselves. When something happens, the mind immediately tries to explain it. But that explanation is not always the truth. It is often only an interpretation. Someone looks at you strangely. You decide they dislike you. Someone speaks briefly. You decide they are being arrogant. Someone disagrees with you. You decide they are attacking you. And suddenly you are angry at a story that may not even be true. This is why the disciplined person learns to separate facts from interpretations. What actually happened? What am I assuming? What evidence do I have? What part of this is within my control? These questions create distance between reality and emotional reaction. That distance is powerful. Because anger thrives on certainty. It tells you that you know exactly why someone behaved the way they did. It tells you their intention was obvious. It tells you they wanted to hurt you. It tells you they deserve punishment. But sometimes you don't know, and admitting that you don't know can protect you from unnecessary anger. Perhaps they were distracted. Perhaps they were struggling with something you cannot see. Perhaps they misunderstood you. Perhaps they made a mistake. Perhaps they really were disrespectful. Even then, you still have a choice about how you respond. You do not need to create an emotional explosion simply because someone behaved badly. There is a mature form of strength that says, I see what happened. I understand that it was unacceptable, and I will deal with it without becoming controlled by it. That is not weakness. That is mastery. One of the most dangerous lies anger tells you is that reacting immediately proves you are strong. It convinces you that silence means weakness and restraint means cowardice. But look at the strongest people you know. The person who can remain calm while everyone else is losing control is rarely the weakest person in the room. they are often the most dangerous person to underestimate. Why? Because they can think, they can observe, they can choose. They are not being dragged around by every emotional impulse. A person who is angry may have enormous physical energy, but energy without direction is destruction. A fire can provide warmth, but a fire without boundaries can burn the entire house. Anger is similar. Controlled, it can sometimes alert you that something needs to change. Uncontrolled, it can destroy the very things you were trying to protect. This is why you must learn the difference between anger and courage. Anger says, attack. Courage says, face the problem. Anger says, make them suffer. Courage says, do what is right. Anger says, prove yourself. Courage says, know yourself. Anger needs an audience. Courage does not. Anger wants recognition. Courage can operate in silence. This is why the strongest response is sometimes no emotional response at all. Not because you have nothing to say, because you have enough self-respect to choose when your words deserve to be spoken. There are conversations you should have. There are boundaries you should establish. There are people you should leave. There are situations you should confront. But you can do all of these things without allowing anger to take command. Imagine telling someone calmly, I will not accept being spoken to that way. That sentence can carry more power than an hour of shouting. Imagine walking away from an argument rather than continuing until both people say things they cannot take back. That decision can protect a relationship. Imagine refusing to answer an insulting message because you recognize that the message was designed to provoke you. That restraint can protect your peace. You begin to realize that not every battle deserves your energy. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn because the ego wants to respond. The ego wants to be understood. It wants the final word. It wants to prove that it is right. It wants the other person to admit defeat. But the need to win every argument can become another form of slavery. If you need everyone to agree with you, you are controlled by disagreement. If you need everyone to respect you, you are controlled by disrespect. If you need everyone to understand you, you are controlled by misunderstanding. If you need everyone to treat you fairly, you are controlled by unfair people. Freedom begins when you stop making your peace conditional upon the behavior of others. That does not mean becoming indifferent. It means becoming selective. Your attention is valuable. Your energy is valuable. Your emotional capacity is valuable. Do not spend all three on people who contribute nothing to your growth. There is another reason anger makes you weak. It narrows your vision. When you are calm, you can see several possibilities. When you are furious, you often see only one. You see the insult. You see the injustice. You see the person who hurt you. You see the need to respond. Everything else disappears. Your future disappears. The consequences disappear. Your values disappear. Your long-term goals disappear. The present emotion becomes the entire universe. That is why people make decisions while angry that they later regret. The emotion is temporary, but the consequences can remain. You may apologize for the words, but you cannot always erase the memory. You may regret the message, but the person may already have read it. You may wish you had stayed silent, but the relationship may already be damaged. The Stoic understands that the best time to control anger is before anger controls action. You don't fight the fire after the house has burned down. You learn to prevent the fire from spreading. This is why self-awareness matters. Know what triggers you. Know the people who consistently pull you into emotional chaos. Know the subjects that make you defensive. Know the situations in which your judgment becomes unstable. Then prepare yourself before entering them. If you know someone enjoys provoking you, do not give them easy access to your emotions. If you know a certain conversation always becomes destructive, choose a better time and environment. If you know you make poor decisions when angry, never make major decisions while emotionally overwhelmed. You do not have to trust yourself equally in every emotional state. Wisdom means understanding your weaknesses before they become disasters. And perhaps the most important thing you can do is learn to delay your response. You do not have to answer immediately. You do not have to send the message immediately. You do not have to make the decision immediately. You do not have to defend yourself immediately. You can wait until your mind becomes clear. Sometimes the most powerful sentence you can say is, "I will respond when I can think clearly." That is not avoidance. That is discipline, because anger wants speed. Wisdom values timing. A delayed response gives you information that an immediate reaction cannot provide. It allows the emotional intensity to decrease. It allows you to see consequences. It allows you to separate what you feel from what you actually need to do. And sometimes, after the anger fades, you realize there was nothing worth responding to. That realization can save you from enormous suffering. Think about how many arguments begin because someone felt disrespected and wanted to defend their ego. Now imagine what would happen if you stopped treating every disagreement as a threat to your identity. Someone can disagree with you without diminishing you. Someone can criticize your decision without destroying your worth. Someone can reject you without proving that you are worthless. Someone can leave without proving that you are unlovable. Someone can misunderstand you without changing who you are. When you stop interpreting every external event as a judgment of your identity, anger loses another source of fuel. You become harder to manipulate. This matters because some people deliberately provoke others. They know that certain words will create an emotional reaction. They know which subjects make you defensive. They know how to make you explain yourself. They know how to make you chase. And if they know these things, they can control the conversation. But when you become emotionally disciplined, their strategy becomes ineffective. They provoke. You observe. They escalate. You remain composed. They demand a reaction. You choose whether one is necessary. Eventually, they realize that they cannot control you through emotional pressure. That is power, not the power to dominate another person. The power to remain yourself. There is also a deeper form of anger that many people carry for years. Resentment. Resentment is anger that has learned to live quietly. It can become part of your identity. You remember what someone did years ago. You replay the betrayal. You imagine what you should have said. You wonder what would have happened if things had been different. You carry the person with you even though they are no longer present. They are living somewhere else, perhaps completely unaware of how much mental space they occupy in your life. And you continue paying for something that happened in the past. This is why forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, can be an act of freedom. Forgiveness does not mean saying what happened was acceptable. It does not mean allowing the person back into your life. It does not mean forgetting the lesson. It means refusing to remain emotionally chained to the event. You can remember without remaining imprisoned. You can learn without remaining bitter. You can establish boundaries without carrying hatred. You can walk away without spending the rest of your life trying to punish someone in your mind. The past cannot be changed, but your relationship with the past can change. That is where healing begins. Sometimes people believe anger keeps them safe. They think if they stop being angry, they will become vulnerable again. But anger is not the same as protection. Boundaries protect you. Wisdom protects you. Awareness protects you. Discernment protects you. Self-respect protects you. Anger may create the illusion of protection while quietly destroying your peace. You don't need to hate someone to stay away from them. You don't need to scream to establish a boundary. You don't need revenge to move forward. You need clarity. And clarity is difficult to find when your mind is constantly burning with resentment. This is why emotional discipline should become part of your daily life. Do not wait until you are furious to practice self-control. Practice it when the stakes are small. Practice choosing not to respond to a minor irritation. Practice listening without interrupting. Practice accepting criticism without immediately defending yourself. Practice changing your mind when evidence proves you wrong. Practice walking away from pointless arguments. Practice keeping your voice calm when someone else raises theirs. Every small act of restraint strengthens the same muscle. Then, when a serious situation arrives, you are not trying to learn self-control in the middle of the storm. You have already trained for it. This is how character is built, not through one dramatic moment, through thousands of small decisions. The person who becomes emotionally strong does not wake up one morning magically transformed. They practice, they fail, they catch themselves, they apologize when necessary, they study their reactions. They become more aware. They try again. Eventually, the reaction that once controlled them becomes something they can observe without obeying. That is transformation. And perhaps one of the most beautiful things about this transformation is that you begin to experience life differently. You stop taking everything personally. You stop assuming every disagreement is an attack. You stop feeling responsible for controlling everyone's opinion. You stop chasing people who constantly disturb your peace. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop wasting energy proving that you are worthy. And slowly, your mind becomes quieter. Not because the world became quieter, because you became less available to chaos. That is what emotional freedom looks like. You still care. You still love. You still feel. You still experience disappointment. But you are no longer dragged wherever those emotions want to take you. You become the person holding the reins. And this is why anger makes you weak when you surrender to it. It takes the very thing you need most to make wise decisions, your judgment. It turns a temporary feeling into permanent consequences. It makes another person's behavior the center of your world. It encourages you to exchange long-term peace for short-term satisfaction. And it can slowly transform you into someone who is always fighting battles that do not deserve your energy. The Stoic chooses another path. When anger arrives, you do not have to panic. You do not have to deny it. You do not have to pretend you are unaffected. You simply recognize it. You understand what triggered it. You examine the judgment behind it. You ask what is within your control. And then you choose your response according to your values rather than your impulse. That is where your strength returns. The goal is not to become a person who never gets angry. The goal is to become a person whose anger cannot easily make decisions for them. Because anger will visit you, life will test you, people will disappoint you, someone will say something unfair, someone will misunderstand you, someone will attempt to provoke you. And when that moment comes, remember this: your reaction is a decision. You can give the moment your peace, or you can keep it. You can let another person's behavior determine your character, or you can determine it yourself. You can become the anger, or you can observe the anger. You can react, or you can respond. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not making the other person regret what they did. It is reaching the end of the situation and realizing that you remained yourself. You did not become cruel because someone was cruel to you. You did not become dishonest because someone lied to you. You did not become bitter because someone hurt you. You did not become reckless because someone provoked you. You remained disciplined. You remained rational. You remained in command. That is the kind of strength no one can take from you. There will always be people who want a reaction. Give them nothing they can use against your peace. There will always be situations that make you angry. Use them as training grounds for self-mastery. There will always be moments when your ego demands the final word. Let wisdom decide whether the final word is worth the cost. There will always be something outside your control. Bring your attention back to what is within it. Your thoughts, your choices, your actions, your character, your response. This is where your freedom lives. The world does not need another person who reacts to every insult, every criticism, every disappointment, and every inconvenience with anger. The world needs people who can remain steady when everything around them becomes unstable. People who can disagree without hatred. People who can establish boundaries without cruelty. People who can walk away without revenge. People who can experience pain without becoming destructive. People who can be strong without becoming hard. People who can be calm without becoming passive. That is the strength worth pursuing, because anyone can lose control. Anyone can shout. Anyone can insult. Anyone can explode. But it takes discipline to remain calm when anger is demanding action. It takes wisdom to recognize when silence is more powerful than an argument. It takes courage to walk away from revenge. It takes maturity to admit when your own reaction was wrong. And it takes real strength to protect your peace without surrendering your principles. So the next time anger rises inside you, remember that you are standing at a crossroads. One path gives your emotions control. The other gives you yourself. One path may provide a few seconds of satisfaction, followed by regret. The other may feel difficult in the moment, but leave you with something far more valuable: self-respect. Choose carefully, because the person who can control your anger can influence your life. And the person who learns to control their anger becomes increasingly difficult for anyone to control. That is the freedom the Stoics were pointing toward. Not a life without conflict. A life in which conflict does not own you. Not a life without pain. A life in which pain does not dictate your character. Not a life without anger. A life in which anger does not become your master. Your strength is not measured by how loudly you can respond. It is measured by how much power you have over yourself when you have every reason to lose control. Master that, and you will discover that the strongest person in the room is not always the one who wins the argument. Sometimes it is the one who refuses to lose himself in it. If this message spoke to you, and you want to continue building a stronger mind, a calmer character, and a life guided by wisdom rather than impulse, subscribe to the Stoic Path. Here, we are not chasing perfection. We are training ourselves to become stronger, wiser, more disciplined, and harder to control. Walk this path with us, and let every lesson become another step toward mastering yourself.